My name's Annette Raynor. I'm here on behalf of myself.
Thank you. Yes, whenever you're ready.
Right. Good afternoon. Let me start by saying how disappointed I am with this report. I was hoping the community would be heard. However, if you accept all the figures in this report as facts, which I don't, but for the sake of the argument say I do, well, I could still drive the road train through this report. The facts and figures do not stack up. In front of me are the reports relating to your final report. Your final report, the CSRIO report on well life integrity and life cycle, the ACL and economic report, and the coffee social licence reports, which are 3 separate reports. I have read them all.
Thank you.
Let me start by saying thank you to the panel for the recommendations in Chapter 14, Regulatory Reform, and Chapter 15, Environmental Baseline Data. We all know the NT badly needs this. However, as it is already being watered down, and as the first time I sat in front of you, I said then it would not be enforced, I will not repeat myself. As far as Chapter 11 goes, as I am not an Aboriginal, I will leave this to the Aboriginals themselves to respond to. This is to ensure you cannot accuse me of giving any misleading or spreading any misinformation to you, the panel. Chapter 9, Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Well, this chapter did my head in. But if it's like any of the other chapters, which I do understand, then the figures are simply made up. The only one thing I'll state as a comment on this is on page 203 of your report, you state, and I quote, that there is no evidence that the bubbling Condamine River is due to CSG activities, unquote. All I can say to that, it's a good thing that no baseline data was done prior to the CSG activities to prove it. Chapter 8, Land. On page 169, you state that between 1,000 and 1,500 metres squared will be used for the well pad development only. You make this sound insignificant, but this is for each well pad. So let's put it into perspective. I have here examples of what is approximately 1 kilometre squared, and this insignificant amount of land is the size of Sydney Olympic Park wetlands and waterways, Belmont Golf Club at Port Macquarie, Pi Chang Island in Hong Kong, or the old city of Jerusalem. This is per well pad. Yet on pages 316 and 325, for the breeze scenario only, you state that the total land use under this scenario is approximately 67 square kilometres. Well, that is approximately the size of Norfolk Island and Macau combined, or it's just slightly bigger than Bermuda. And yet again, on page 327, you reiterate, and I quote, land area used by industry is very small under all development scenarios, unquote. Once again, you say this is acceptable. Now, I know the NT is a big place and we have a small population in the scheme of things around the world. And most of the population lives in Darwin, but this is not acceptable. The only other comment for this section is that you talk about landscape amenity, pages 187 through to 190, and how small an area this will be and it will not affect our landscape. Small area is firstly an understatement, but I would suggest the panel take a drive across the Barkly Highway at night. It is already flaring. It is already affecting our spectacular unspoiled landscape. This, I say, is not acceptable. Chapter 7, Water. Using your figures and applying it to the PFAS issue here in Katherine that we're now dealing with, the best case scenario is the Katherine River was only contaminated when we found out about it in 2016 and not before. Working backwards, using your figures, this took 16 years to get from Base Tyndall to the Katherine River, 1,000 metres per year. Therefore, PFAS reached the Tyndall aquifer in the year 2000. This means that it took approximately 12 years to contaminate or seep down to the aquifer because Tyndall opened in 1988. Now, this would correspond with your figures on page 140, stating that any spill would take 10 years to reach the groundwater. However, it contradicts what you state on pages 114 and 137, stating it would only travel metres per year and would take decades for the water to travel 100 metres. Now, PFAS is only one chemical, not a multiple of chemicals, mixed together, put under pressure, and then mixed with naturally occurring nasties that occur underground. But I'll come back to that. Your matrix, even if I believe that the possibility is extremely low of contamination, the consequence must be extremely high. Unless, of course, you've learnt to live without water. Therefore, the overall outcome must be at least medium. You have found 20 water-related risks, and it will only take one to have serious consequences. Even with regulations in place, this is not good enough, this is not acceptable. Jumping now to Chapter 10, Public Health, you found a low likelihood and a low to medium consequence, which was on page 231, of affecting any of us. Well, this ties nicely into the water issue, so let's go back to those chemicals and other natural occurring nasties. I have here a list of fracking chemicals used from your website, from Santos and Origin's websites. So I'm going to have a look at just some of those, not all of them, just some of them. Now, all of these except one state, because these are all the MDS chemical sheets for them. All of these except one state, and I quote, do not allow any of the product to enter waterways, drains or sewers, or do not discharge into drains, surface water and groundwater. All of these state they must be transported under dangerous goods transport regulations. All of these state if the product does enter a waterway, they must advise the Environmental Protection Authority. And this one states that if the runoff from the runoff from diluted water may be toxic and or corrosive and pollute waterways. Do not allow this product to enter waterways, drains and sewers. Now these are each individual chemical. They are not a multiple of mixtures. You cannot find any MDS sheets for the combination of any of the chemicals, let alone the naturally occurring nasties that you are now bringing from the ground to the surface. Once again, I ask the panel to look at the big picture. This is not one chemical, one well being fracked once. This is multiple chemicals, multiple wells being fracked multiple times. And once again, you say this is acceptable. But before I go any further, let's have a look at what that word actually means. I've done some research from numerous dictionaries, and they all say the same thing. Acceptable is barely passable. It's 65%. It's satisfactory. Now, under that terminology, I do not want to go to a doctor that is acceptable. I do not want my pilot in an aircraft I'm travelling in to be acceptable. You may be able to live with that, but acceptable to me is not good enough. The social impacts, chapter 12. I don't know where to start with this one. You state in that chapter that it will be updated when Coffee completes their reports. Well, they have released their reports now in 3 different sections. 2 of the sections deal with how to set up a framework for the social licensing. The other section, which is the section I'm holding, is supposedly the Beetaloo Sub-Basin Social Licence case study. It's this area I'm going to discuss. Most of the information in this document, any school-aged child who could Google something could present the information in here. On pages 6 and 9, they both state there were 2 rounds of community consultations. Not true. Page 10 states that the Katherine Town Council was consulted, and yet when I spoke to the Katherine Town Council on the 23rd of January, the Mayor denied being spoken to and the CEO could not recall. On page XVII, the conclusion, the report states, and I quote, "Concerns about water resources are heightened by the PFAS contamination in and around RAF Base Tyndall near Katherine, and incorrect assumptions about water management based in CSG in Queensland." Once again, not true. But this is the only issue of any kind in this document that could even remotely be attributed to the one consultation Katherine had. Now, last time I sat in front of you, I spoke on this subject in depth. This report and the coffee report does not take anything previously stated to you into account. However, as far as your report goes, I will question why, in bold on page 280, you would highlight fly-in, fly-out activists. After all, you mentioned more than once misinformation to create fear, lacking understanding of technical facts, confusing CSG and shale. We're not locals. I thought this was a scientific report, but it seems it's only a scientific fact if it comes from a gas company, a government department whose primary job is the industry, a consultant company who has never said anything against the gas industry, or a person and or company who has been paid in some way by the gas industry. And in some circumstances, they are so behind these companies because it's so great that they're selling their places and moving. Everyone else who has presented or spoken knows absolutely nothing. Finally, on this subject, I know of at least 2 complaints that were lodged to you, the panel, over the second attempt of the social licence consultations. Neither have been responded to or addressed. As such, if you think I can believe this whole section and take it seriously, well, I question what planet you're living on. This does bring into doubt not just this section, but the whole report for me. Moving on, the last chapter I'll speak about is the Economic Impacts, Chapter 13. I have used yours and AC Allen's figures and taken them as facts, and I could still drive that road train through the misinformation contained in this section. I am only using the breeze scenario, and I am using your figures in the table on page 315 and 316. Now, just looking at these figures, everything looks wonderful. So let's have a look at it in a little bit deeper. Increased employment. According to this, we can expect 2,145 extra jobs over the 25 years at an average of 82 per year. But the rest of Australia loses that amount of jobs. I wonder where they all went. You admit on page 323 that fly-in, fly-out workers would be significant and therefore will take most of these jobs. The other figures that are interesting that we'll get per year as an average is 6.2 million in income tax. In other federal and state taxes, that's broken down to 3.8 million and 5.9 million, giving us a total of 9.7 million. GST of 14.3 million, payroll of 2.9 million, and royalties of 11.9 million. Like I said, it all looks great. But when you go to the Australian Taxation Office, and I have here the ATO bits for 2013-14, 14-15 and 15-16. And shock horror, there's been no income tax paid to the Australian government in 2015 or 16 by Santos or Origin. Matter of fact, Origin must have made a mistake because they did pay some in 2014. I also have, from Santos and Origin, their own reports for 2014, 15 and 16. I am using these reports for the next lot of information. Due to the time that I'm sure is about to run out...
No, you've got about 20 minutes left.
Oh, I only had 20 minutes.
Oh, well, you've got another 10 then. This is all great information, so please continue.
I'm only using the 2016 report from both Santos and Origin.
Yep.
Both paid no income tax. Both paid no petroleum resource tax. Both paid no goods and service tax. In fact, both received tax refunds. But let's look at the tax they did pay. Origin paid $4 million and Santos paid $5.04 million for fringe benefits. Payroll tax, Origin paid $45 million, Santos paid $2.78 million. Royalties, Origin paid $6 million and Santos paid $30.26 million. Now, all these figures are for the whole of Australia, not just one state, they're Australia-wide. So using these figures alone and presuming that all the other companies are very similar, we can say goodbye to the $6.2 million in income tax. We can say goodbye to at least some, if not all, of the other state and federal taxes of $9.7 million. And the $14.3 million in GST we can kiss goodbye. So this leaves us with maybe the FBT. Now for the payroll tax, I did some figures. And using the NT government's own bits and pieces, I have here that we only receive 5.5%, and I've used their calculation of how to calculate payroll tax. So if we use all of that, the amount is approximately, that you quote we will get, is approximately 12% more than Santos pays in total, Australia-wide, or approximately 6% more than Origin pays in total, Australia-wide, not just for the NT. Now, admittedly, this $2.9 million per year would be spread over other companies and it wouldn't be just Santos and Origin paying it. But due to how the payroll tax is worked out, and with that figure in mind, it's just mind-blowing that you think we're going to get $2.9 million when the calculation clearly states that we haven't got a hope in hell of doing that. Like I said, we only get 5.5% of the total allowable taxable wages that are paid in the NT only. To receive this amount of money, we would need, I did a very rough calculation, 19 companies paying $2.7 million in allowable taxable wages in the NT only, but the catch is they also have to have taxable wages in other states of Australia that total at or over $10.4 million per year. Like I said, I've used the NT government and the federal government information to get that figure. Now that's just totally obscene when you truly look at it. But you say this is a fact. That's what the book states. So finally, let's look at the royalties. This is approximately 39% more than what Santos pays now. It's approximately 199% more than what Origin pays now. And once again, that's Australia-wide. Now, once again, I understand that there will be more companies than just Santos and Origin spreading the load. But really, those figures just don't stack up. They paid no GST, no income tax, no resources tax. They actually received a refund and you expect me to buy those figures. I am truly disgusted and emotive with this report, and the fact that you believe that we would buy this without question is even more disgusting to me. I would hope you would re-look honestly at the figures that you have presented and the issues that have been presented to you before your final report.
Thank you very much for your very comprehensive presentation. I have to say it's one of the best we've had, so thank you for the effort you've put in. Have you submitted that as a, I hope, yes?
That
we've
will
got that
go
as
to
a,
them now.
Excellent, good, thank you very much for that. And we will certainly chase some of the matters you raised down. Just a couple of points. We don't expect you to buy, those are your words, this report. The whole purpose of these consultations is for you to test and challenge the report in exactly the way that you have done, and I'm very glad that you have done that, so thank you. Page 280, FIFO activists, I've got no idea why that's in bold. I suspect that's a typographical, that's just a mistake, so there is nothing nefarious about that, but it's in quotes because that's come from somebody's submission, but it's a mistake that it's in bold. The two complaints to the panel about the second round of coffee consultations, I'm not aware of those, and I do intend to chase those down. Who were they? You said you knew of two. Who were
Mine
they?
was one.
Yours was one, thank you.
And Dr. Errol Lawson was the other one.
Okay.
And I received an email stating you had received it.
Right, okay, thank you. Was that in a form of a sort of a submission? Has it been?
No, it
Okay.
was emailed.
Do you know the date that you emailed it to me, roughly?
When was coffee here? They were here on the 15th, it was the following Monday after the 15th of December.
15th of December, okay.
Because I had to cool off before I could submit what I wanted to write to.
It may, I don't know, it may have slipped through the cracks, but I will certainly chase both of those down. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Johns.
Just a comment about your time of travel calculation in the Katherine region here. The water does move a lot faster in the northern region here. That's quite correct. Where we based our calculation on was in the central Beetaloo, where it is only a very slow travel time. So you are correct in your assessment of the rapid travel time in the north, but where we were talking about the slow travel time is extant for that area. And that's exactly why, when you do a risk assessment, you have to look at regional specificities, and that's why we're recommending the strategic baseline assessment, so we actually get a much better idea of what those critical differences are.
Yes, any further questions? I'm keen to get hold of that, all the
It's
detail,
all there.
so we can have a look at it. Yes, Dr. Beck.
Yes, so thank you very much for that detailed analysis of the finances too. So I'd like to have some further discussions with you on that, so I just understand some of the details. I just note that in terms of the Acel Allen report, they have considered the various royalties and resource rent tax regimes, and they've presented both gross figures and also average annual figures. Certainly in the resource rent tax case, that only comes into being much downstream of the project life because the resource rent tax is paid after deductions have been made for depreciation and amortisation, and it's on the profits of the company after those particular events have occurred. So, so the calculations will have allowance for resource rent tax, but if it's going to occur at all, it will occur towards the end of the 25-year period, and so that may be one of the explanations, but nevertheless I would like to have some discussions with you on some of the details.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, if you look back through their stuff, they're not paying it full stop.
No.
And that's Australia-wide. So why we think we're going to get it here is mind-blowing to me. So,
Any further, yes, Professor Hart.
Could I just follow up Dr. Jones' comment about seepage?
yes.
And going through, and just you juxtaposition what was going on around the Tyndall Air Base, PFAS and so forth, with Beetaloo. We didn't comment specifically on those two differences, but we did point out the parameters that we considered in terms of if there's a spill, size, distance to the groundwater aquifer, permeability of that distance, 100 metres or whatever. They're very different when you go between Katherine, which is very karstic, and a very rapid flow of the Tyndall aquifer. So they're not really very compatible. We still have there, as we've said, with our Cereba, there are still uncertainties, perhaps a little less for the northern part of Beetaloo. This is in terms of flow rates, recharge and so forth of the groundwater, but certainly for the southern part. I mean, we can't really see with the rainfall and the evaporation. Rainfall, perhaps about 450 mil, evaporation 2.5 metres at least, that there's going to be really any recharge there. So that's part of what has to be obtained. But again, I think the PFAS situation is a good one when you look at the overall situation. I don't think it's relevant for Beetaloo, but I think it is relevant for other areas. And it just reinforces the whole business about you have to be extremely knowledgeable in terms of your knowledge base of what's likely to occur from that perspective.
My point with using PFAS, because I totally understand that the Beetaloo's
Sure.
not the same ground as we've got here. My point with that is PFAS was one chemical.
Sure.
You are doing multiple chemicals with other items that come up from the ground. And I don't care if it takes 100 years to seep down. Unless you can live without water, then our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, what are they going to do? We can all say, oh, too bad, we made some money, to hell with you. Well, I don't think that's good enough. PFAS was one chemical, it was safe. The fireys were told they could drink it, it was that safe. Now, they all weren't that stupid because they saw that it took paint off the trucks, but they bathed in it. It was a safe chemical. Now, might take an extra 100 years to do, but I don't care. Unless you can live without water, you're not talking one chemical.
True.
True. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Smith.
I might just follow up a little bit on that mixture toxicity. And you've done such a wonderful job of researching background information for many of the points you raised. I wonder whether you accessed the two Santos risk assessments for the Surat Basin and Narrabri projects, which we've referenced in the report. I think we're on record of saying we've got some concerns about some of the methodologies in those assessments, but they do go into at least a desktop assessment of mixture toxicity for fracturing fluids. Have you been able to have a look at those reports? Have you got any comments to make on the methodologies that they've used in that?
I don't believe a word they say, so no.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. There's no more questions. We will now have a break until, I think, 1:45 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. Just before we start, I just want to clarify some things that arose out of this morning's sessions, particularly out of the last speaker, Ms. Annette Raynor. Ms. Raynor claims 2 complaints were sent to the inquiry and that they have gone unanswered regarding, and the complaints were about the coffee social impact assessment, or at least framework reports. The complaints were from herself, she said, and Dr. Errol Lawson. First, dealing with Ms. Raynor's complaint. Ms. Raynor emailed the complaint to the inquiry on Saturday, the 16th of December 2017, and that was regarding the social impact framework consultations held in Katherine on the 15th of December 2017. Now, the inquiry responded to Ms. Raynor on Wednesday, the 20th of December 2017, and noted in its contact to her that due to the looming Christmas period, that's a direct quote, it would obviously put her complaint to Coffee and await Coffee's response and then get back to her. Coffee provided a letter of response to the inquiry regarding Ms. Raynor's claims on the 31st of January 2018. That is the day after we went on the road, commencing in Nhulunbuy near Kala with consultations on the 30th of January 2018. With respect to the allegation that Mr. Errol Lawson had made a complaint that had gone unanswered, Mr. Lawson provided a submission, not a complaint. That submission is on the inquiry's website at submission number 530. And that was a submission that was provided to us on the 2nd of January 2018 in respect of the Coffee Social Impact Framework and a meeting held in Katherine in December of 2017. Again, the inquiry has, as it's right and fair to do, put Mr. Lawson's comments in his submission to Coffee. Again, Coffee has only just received the letter from Coffee, the inquiry has only just received the letter from Coffee on the 31st of January 2018. That is the day after we commenced our community consultations. The second matter is the allegation that there were not two meetings in Katherine, and indeed there was no meeting that took place between Coffee and Katherine Town Council. There were in fact two meetings in 2 rounds of consultation in Katherine. The first was on the 28th of July 2017, where Coffee met with the CEO of Katherine Town Council, Mr. Robert Jennings, and that has now been confirmed. There was a second public consultation meeting held by Coffee on the 15th of December 2017, and Ms. Raynor attended that meeting. At that meeting, the CEO of the council was an apology. Thank you. I should also say that we invited Ms. Raynor to be present whilst I read that material out, and she understandably had to go back to work.